When Shaquille O'Neal walked into a luxury jet showroom, he expected to buy his dream plane, not to face blatant racism. What started as a routine purchase turned into a shocking moment of humiliation. But Shaq didn't back down. Instead, he exposed discrimination on a global stage, took a stand for justice, and turned the tables in the most powerful way. This incredible story of resilience and triumph will leave you speechless and inspired to fight for equality. Let us know where are you watching from. Also, hit the subscribe button for notifications of daily stories like this. Let's begin the story. Shaquille O'Neal had always been a man of big dreams. He wasn't just a basketball legend, he was a businessman, an entertainer, and a symbol of success. Over the years, he had built an empire, investing in businesses, real estate, and even tech companies. But now, he wanted something personal, a private jet, not for luxury, not to show off, but for freedom. Shaq spent most of his time traveling, meetings, charity events, television appearances. He was always on the move, and flying commercial had become a headache. Delays, security lines, and the constant attention for fans made every trip exhausting. A private jet would change that. He could move on his schedule, have privacy, and travel in comfort. One evening, Shaq sat in his Miami mansion, scrolling through his tablet, looking at different jet models. He had already spoken to a few experts and narrowed his choices down to one: a sleek, state-of-the-art aircraft with a spacious cabin, comfortable seating, and top-tier technology. It was expensive, over $50 million, but for Shaq, it was an investment. He leaned back in his chair, smiling. "This is it," he said to himself. Shaq picked up his phone and called his financial advisor, Jason. "Hey Jason, I'm ready. Let's set up a visit to that showroom you mentioned." "Sounds good, Shaq," Jason replied. "They cater to high-net-worth individuals, so they should treat you well." Shaq chuckled. "Should? Man, I'm buying a whole jet. They better roll out the red carpet," Jason laughed. "I'll book an appointment for you tomorrow. You want me to come with you?" "Nah, I got this," Shaq said. "I'll go alone. I just want to see the jet, feel it, you know." The next morning, Shaq woke up early, excited. He dressed simply, black jeans, a loose t-shirt, and sneakers. He never liked wearing suits unless he had to. To him, success wasn't about how you dressed, it was about what you could afford. His driver took him to the showroom, a massive glass building located in a private airfield. As he stepped out of the car, he felt a wave of excitement. This was a big moment. A receptionist, a slim woman in a formal suit, looked up as he walked in. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Hello, sir. Can I help you?" Shaq smiled. "Yeah, I got an appointment. I'm here to check out the jet." She hesitated. "Your name?" "Shaquille O'Neal." She blinked, typing into her computer. "Oh, okay. One moment." Shaq noticed her glancing at him, then at her colleague, whispering something. He had been famous long enough to know when someone recognized him. But there was something else in her expression. Not excitement, not respect, but doubt. A few minutes later, a salesman appeared. He was a middle-aged man in a perfectly tailored suit, his hair slicked back. His name tag read, Richard. "Mr. O'Neal," the man said, forcing a smile. "That's me," Shaq replied, offering a handshake. Richard shook his hand briefly, then pulled away. "So, what brings you here today?" Shaq raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to buy a jet." There was a pause. Richard looked him up and down, as if trying to decide if he was serious. "A jet," he repeated. Shaq nodded. "Yeah, the one I booked an appointment for." Richard glanced at the receptionist, who quickly looked away. He sighed and forced another smile. "Of course, Mr. O'Neal. Right this way." Shaq followed him through the showroom, noticing how other customers, mostly older white men in expensive suits, were being greeted with enthusiasm. Some were sipping champagne, discussing their options with smiling salespeople. But Shaq? He got none of that. As they walked, Shaq decided to test something. "So, tell me about the jet," he said. "What's the fuel efficiency? What's the cabin space like?" Richard hesitated. "Well, it's top of the line." Shaq folded his arms. "I know that. I did my research. I want details." Richard coughed. "You really plan on buying one?" Shaq frowned. "Why else would I be here?" Richard gave a small laugh, but it wasn't friendly. "Well, these jets are very expensive, Mr. O'Neill." Shaq's eyes narrowed. "You think I can't afford it?" Richard's face turned slightly red. No, I didn't mean that. It's just that our usual clientele is a certain type of buyer." Shaq's jaw tightened. He had heard this before. A certain type of buyer was just a polite way of saying, "Not you." But he stayed calm. "All right, so show me the jet." Richard hesitated again, then sighed. "Follow me." As they walked, Shaq could hear whispers behind him. Some of the staff were whispering, exchanging looks. "That's Shaq, right? Why's he here?" "He's not serious, just wasting time." Shaq clenched his fists. He had dealt with racism before, but every time it still stung. He wasn't just a retired athlete. He was a businessman, a multimillionaire. And yet, here he was, being treated like an outsider in a place where his money should have spoken for itself. But he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Because Shaquille O'Neal didn't back down from a fight. Shaq followed Richard through the brightly lit showroom, his large frame moving smoothly despite the tension in the air. He had walked into places where people doubted him before. High-end jewelry stores, real estate offices, even business meetings. He knew that no matter how much money he had, some people still saw him as just a former athlete, a big black man who didn't belong in their world of luxury. But he wasn't here for him. He was here for himself. As they reached the private hangar where the jets were displayed, Shaq noticed something. A few feet away, another potential buyer, a white man in a tailored navy blue suit, was being given a full VIP experience. A different salesman stood beside him, enthusiastically explaining every feature of the jet he was considering. A flight attendant in a pristine uniform offered him champagne. The man was smiling, nodding as the salesman gestured toward the cockpit. Shaq, on the other hand, got none of that. Richard cleared his throat. "All right, Mr. O'Neill, here it is." Before them stood the jet Shaq had been researching for weeks. Sleek, modern, with a polished white exterior and an elegant black stripe running along the side. Shaq nodded, his excitement coming back for a moment. "Beautiful. Can I see inside?" Richard hesitated. "Well, normally we only show the interior to serious buyers." Shaq turned to him slowly. His voice was calm, but firm. "I am a serious buyer." Richard gave a small, tight-lipped smile, as if trying to keep himself from rolling his eyes. "Of course. Follow me." He pressed a button, and the jet's door lowered, forming a staircase. Shaq stepped inside, taking in the spacious cabin. Plush leather seats, a high-tech entertainment system, soft lighting that made the interior feel more like a luxury apartment than a plane. He ran his hand over the armrest of one of the seats, imagining himself sitting here, flying to his next business meeting or heading to see his family without the hassle of commercial flights. "This is nice," Shaq said, nodding. "What's the cabin height?" Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" "The cabin height. How tall is it? I need to make sure I can stand up comfortably." Richard shifted uncomfortably. Well, it's about 6 feet 2 inches. Shaq, who stood at 7'1", let out a short chuckle. "Guess I'll be ducking my head a lot." Richard forced a laugh but quickly changed the subject. "So, Mr. O'Neill, just to be clear, you're considering purchasing this jet?" Shaq gave him a look. Not considering. I'm buying it. Richard hesitated again. Well, sir, this model starts at $52 million, and with customizations, it could go up to $60 million. Shaq exhaled through his nose, patience thinning. I know how much it costs. I came here because I want it. Richard scratched the back of his neck. Right. It's just that usually buyers of this level go through brokers, not directly to the showroom. Shaq folded his arms. You mean your usual buyers? Richard didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward the entrance of the jet, where another salesman had entered, speaking in hushed tones. A moment later, the other customer, the man in the navy blue suit, stepped onto the jet, sipping his champagne. Shaq turned to Richard, his expression unreadable. What's this? Richard looked nervous. Oh, Mr. Edwards here is also interested in this model. Before Richard could finish, the other man, Edwards, gave Shaq a quick, dismissive glance. Oh, didn't know we were doing open tours now. Shaq's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. Didn't know this was your jet. Edwards smirked. Well, I am in the market. Shaq looked at Richard. You just said this model is for sale, right? Richard hesitated. Yes, but... Shaq turned back to Edwards. Then we're both in the market. Edwards chuckled. Right. Well, good luck with that. He turned to the salesman beside him. Show me the cockpit. The salesman nodded eagerly, leading him forward. Meanwhile, Richard stood awkwardly beside Shaq, avoiding eye contact. Shaq took a slow breath, steadying himself. He had dealt with disrespect before, but this was different. This wasn't just about money. It was about who they thought deserved to be here. And they had already decided, without saying it outright, that he didn't. He turned to Richard. You know what? Forget it. Richard looked relieved. Oh, well, Shaq cut him off. Not the jet. I still want it, but I'm done talking to you. Richard blinked. Sir, Shaq turned and walked out of the jet, pulling out his phone. He had given them a chance to treat him with respect. They failed. Now, he'd let the world decide. Shaq stepped out of the jet, his jaw tight with frustration. He had been ignored, doubted, and now outright disrespected. He had come here as a customer, just like the man in the navy blue suit. The only difference was how they were being treated. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He didn't like getting angry. That wasn't his style. But this wasn't just business. This was personal. As he walked back toward the showroom, he overheard whispers from the staff nearby. Why is he even here? He probably doesn't have the money. Just another celebrity trying to look rich. Shaq stopped. His hands curled into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to relax. He turned slowly and looked at the employees who had spoken. You, he said, his deep voice steady. The two salespeople flinched as he pointed at them. You got something to say? Say it to my face. The first one, a slim young man with slicked back hair, looked down at his clipboard. I didn't mean anything, sir. The other, an older man with graying hair, cleared his throat. Mr. O'Neill, we were just discussing... Shaq stepped closer. Discussing what? Whether or not I can afford a jet? Whether or not I belong here? Silence. Shaq let out a slow breath. You see that man in the blue suit? You treated him like a king. You gave him champagne, smiled in his face, showed him his jet like he already owned it. He pointed to himself. But me? You act like I don't belong. The older salesman shifted uncomfortably. Sir, that's not... Don't, Shaq cut him off. Don't lie to me. You think I don't see it? He looked around the showroom, at the other salespeople who were now watching. I've seen this my whole life. In stores, in boardrooms, in meetings. You don't respect people like me. Not unless I prove something to you first. More silence. No one could look him in the eye. Shaq turned and marched toward the front desk. The receptionist stiffened as he approached. "Get your manager," Shaq said. She hesitated. "Sir, is there—" "Now." She picked up the phone quickly. A minute later, a tall man in an expensive gray suit appeared. His name tag read, David Reynolds, General Manager. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. O'Neill," Reynolds said, extending a hand. "Is there a problem?" Shaq didn't shake it. "Yeah, there's a problem." Reynolds slowly lowered his hand. "I'm listening." Shaq crossed his arms. "Your staff doesn't respect me. I walked in here ready to buy a jet. I did my research, I had an appointment, I asked serious questions. But your people? They ignored me, humiliated me, treated me like I was some kid playing make-believe." Reynolds' smile didn't waver. "I assure you, Mr. O'Neill, we treat all our customers equally." Shaq let out a short laugh. "That so?" He pointed toward the hangar. "Because that man in the blue suit? He got VIP treatment. Me? I got attitude, hesitation, and a bunch of whispers behind my back." Reynolds sighed. "Mr. O'Neill, you have to understand, our clientele is, well, it's very exclusive. We have to be careful about who we spend our time with." Shaq narrowed his eyes. "And what exactly does that mean?" Reynolds hesitated for half a second. Then, as if realizing he couldn't backpedal, he straightened his tie. "Sir, this is a high-end establishment. We cater to a certain kind of buyer." Shaq's entire body tensed. There it was, not even hiding it now. "A certain kind of buyer," Shaq repeated, his voice low. Reynolds nodded slightly. "Our usual clients prefer a discreet and professional experience. They don't want distractions or unnecessary publicity." Shaq tilted his head. "And you think I'm a distraction?" Reynolds cleared his throat. "That's not what I meant," Shaq cut him off. "You know what? Forget it. I don't need this jet. Not from you." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Sir, if this is about your feelings being hurt, Shaq chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Nah, this is about respect, and you ain't got none." He turned and started walking toward the exit. But halfway there, he stopped. Then he pulled out his phone. "Sir, what are you doing?" Reynolds asked, his voice suddenly nervous. Shaq didn't answer. He turned on his camera, flipped it to selfie mode, and hit record. He looked straight into the lens. "Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Shaq. I just wanted to share something with you. I came here today to buy a jet I could easily afford. But you know what happened? They didn't take me seriously. They ignored me, laughed at me, humiliated me." He turned the camera toward Reynolds, who looked stunned. "This man right here? He just told me this place only caters to a certain kind of buyer. Y'all hear that? A certain kind." Then he flipped the camera back to himself. "This is what we're still dealing with in 2025. Doesn't matter how much money you got, how successful you are, some people still don't respect you." He ended the video and immediately posted it to Instagram and Twitter. Within seconds, his phone started vibrating. Comments, shares, likes. Reynolds' face had turned pale. "Mr. O'Neill, please, I think we should—" Shaq held up a hand. "Nah. You said what you said? Now the world's gonna hear it, too." He turned and walked out the door, his head held high. Outside, he took a deep breath of fresh air. He knew what was coming next, and he was ready. Shaq sat in the back seat of his black Escalade, his phone buzzing non-stop. He had barely pulled out of the showroom's parking lot when his video started exploding online. First, a few thousand views. then 100,000, then 1,000,000. By the time he got home, it was everywhere. The internet reacts: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. His video had gone viral across all platforms. Respect Shaq and Russia racism in luxury were trending worldwide. The comments poured in. At King James, "Nah, this ain't it. We standing with you, big fella." Serena Williams, "Disgusting. This is why we keep fighting for change." Kevin Hart, "For real. Man, Shaq could buy that showroom if he wanted to. Some people really don't get it." Even major news outlets picked up the story. CNN breaking news: NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal calls out luxury jet dealership for racial discrimination. ESPN headline: Shaq faces humiliation while trying to buy a private jet. Social media erupts. Fans and celebrities weren't just angry, they were furious. Some people started digging up reviews of the showroom, finding other complaints from black customers who claimed they had been ignored or treated unfairly. Others called for a boycott. If they can't respect Shaq, imagine how they treat regular black folks. Don't spend a dime at that place. They need to be held accountable. Period. The pressure on the showroom was growing by the second. The showroom's weak response. A few hours later, the showroom finally responded. They released a short, cold statement. "We take all customer concerns seriously. We regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred during Mr. O'Neal's visit." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a weak attempt to brush it off. It backfired instantly. The internet roasted them. A misunderstanding? Y'all straight up disrespected him. Where's the apology? Where's the accountability? You're only sorry because you got caught. Within hours, the showroom's Yelp and Google reviews plummeted. Their Instagram comments were flooded with snake emojis. And their phones? Ringing off the hook, but not for sales. People were calling to complain. Shaq speaks out. The next morning, Shaq woke up to dozens of interview requests. Good Morning America, CNN, ESPN. Everyone wanted to hear his side of the story. So he went on Instagram Live. He sat in his home office, looking straight into the camera. No script, no PR team. Just Shaq being real. "Listen, y'all, I didn't post that video for sympathy. I posted it because this kind of thing happens every day. Not just to me, to regular people who don't have a platform to call it out." He took a deep breath. "I worked hard my whole life, came from nothing, built my success, and still, I walk into certain places and get treated like I don't belong." He shook his head. "Nah, that ain't right, and I ain't gonna let it slide." Then he dropped the bombshell. "I'm taking legal action." The lawsuit announcement: Shaq's legal team released a statement. "We are pursuing legal action against the luxury jet showroom for racial discrimination and public humiliation. This case is not just about Shaquille O'Neal, it's about ensuring no one else has to experience the same injustice." The moment that news broke, the showroom went into panic mode. They rushed out a second statement, this time actually apologizing. "We deeply regret the incident with Mr. O'Neal and are committed to making changes within our company." But it was too late. Shaq wasn't backing down. His lawyers were already preparing for a massive case, one that could shake the entire luxury industry. The public stands with Shaq people rallied behind him. Civil rights activists called for investigations into racism in high-end businesses. Other black celebrities started sharing their own experiences of being mistreated while shopping for luxury goods. The conversation had shifted. This wasn't just about Shaq versus the showroom. This was about racism in elite spaces. And for once, the whole world was watching. Shaq sat in a high-backed leather chair in his lawyer's office, his massive hands folded on the polished mahogany table. Across from him, his legal team, 3 of the best civil rights attorneys in the country, went over the details of the case. "This isn't just a lawsuit," said Lisa Carter, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer with a reputation for taking on high-profile discrimination cases. "This is a message," Shaq nodded. "I don't just want an apology. I want change." Lisa leaned forward. "Then we go big. Public lawsuit, racial discrimination, defamation, emotional distress. We make them answer for what they did." Shaq's team gathered every piece of evidence. The viral video, where the showroom's manager, David Reynolds, implied that they catered to a certain kind of customer. Statements from witnesses, including some employees who were willing to testify anonymously. Past complaints from black customers who had experienced similar treatment at the showroom. Financial records proving Shaq was more than capable of purchasing the jet, eliminating any excuse that he wasn't a serious buyer. "This is what they don't realize," Shaq said, shaking his head. "If this had happened to a regular person, they would have just walked away feeling small. But me? I got a voice, and I'm gonna use it." Lisa smiled. "Good. Because this lawsuit isn't just about you. It's about every black customer who's been turned away, disrespected, or made to feel like they don't belong." The showroom's desperate defense. When news of the lawsuit broke, the showroom went into full damage control. Their lawyers released a statement. "We deeply regret the misunderstanding with Mr. O'Neill and maintain that our company does not engage in discrimination. We're reviewing our policies to ensure all customers receive equal treatment." Their PR team scrambled to fix their image. They deleted negative comments from their Instagram page, turned off reviews on Google, and even hired a diversity consultant. But it was too late. The public wasn't buying it. A former employee came forward claiming the showroom had an unspoken policy of giving priority service to wealthy white clients. Another black entrepreneur shared a similar experience, saying he had been ignored when trying to purchase a private jet from the same company years ago. This wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern. The case went to court just 2 months later, with the media following every detail. The showroom's lawyers tried every excuse. It wasn't racism, it was just a misunderstanding. Shaq misinterpreted the situation. Our staff was just following standard security protocols. But Shaq's lawyers shut them down. Lisa stood up in court and played the viral video for the judge and jury. They listened as Reynolds' own words played back. "We cater to a certain clientele." A heavy silence filled the courtroom. Lisa turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." The showroom's defense crumbled. When Shaq took the stand, he didn't just speak for himself. He spoke for everyone who'd been made to feel less than. "I've been famous for a long time," he said, looking directly at the jury. "I've had money for a long time. But when I walked into that showroom, none of that mattered." He paused. "I was still just a black man they didn't think belonged there." The jury listened intently as he told his story, how he had been humiliated, ignored, and dismissed. "I'm lucky," he continued. "I had the power to call them out. But what about the people who don't? What about the man who works hard every day, saves up his money, and still gets treated like he's not good enough? Who speaks up for him?" By the time he finished, there wasn't a single person in that courtroom who doubted his case. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Shaq won. The judge ruled that the showroom had engaged in racial discrimination and ordered them to pay a multi-million-dollar fine for damages, implement mandatory racial sensitivity training for all employees, publicly apologize to Shaq and acknowledge their wrongdoing, change their business policies to ensure equal treatment for all customers. It was a massive victory, not just for Shaq, but for everyone who had ever faced discrimination in high-end spaces. As he walked out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed him. "Shaq, "How do you feel about the verdict?" one asked. Shaq smiled. "Justice." Then he looked straight into the cameras. "To everyone out there, don't let nobody tell you where you do or don't belong. Stand up for yourself. Fight for your respect. Always." The internet erupted with celebration. The showroom? Their reputation was in ruins. And Shaq? He still wasn't done. Because now, it was time for him to get the jet he deserved. The gavel struck the judge's desk, sealing the decision. Shaq had won. The ruling was a landmark. The judge didn't just fine the showroom. She made it clear that discrimination in elite spaces would not be tolerated. Outside the courthouse, Shaq's lawyers, supporters, and fans celebrated. Reporters shoved microphones in his face, but he remained calm. "I didn't do this for me," Shaq said, looking into the cameras. "I did this for every person who's been disrespected because of the way they look. Today, we showed the world that your money, your success, none of that should decide if you get treated with respect. You deserve respect just for being human." The showroom tried to do damage control, but the verdict destroyed their reputation. They were fined millions for racial discrimination. They had to issue a public apology, admitting they had treated Shaq unfairly. Their employees were ordered to undergo mandatory racial sensitivity training. Their business license was suspended for a month, costing them millions in lost sales. And worst of all, wealthy clients started pulling their business. No one wanted to be associated with a company caught in a racism scandal. Shaq becomes a symbol of change. The case sparked national conversations. Major news channels debated racism in luxury industries. Celebrities and athletes shared their own experiences. Activists called for stricter regulations to prevent discrimination in high-end businesses. Shaq became more than just an NBA legend. He became a symbol of justice and change. Other Black entrepreneurs came forward with their stories. A successful tech CEO revealed he had been ignored in a luxury car dealership until he pulled out his checkbook. A Grammy-winning musician shared how she was followed around a high-end jewelry store, assumed to be a thief. A wealthy Black real estate investor explained how he had been denied a private club membership despite meeting every requirement. Shaq's case wasn't just one incident. It was a pattern, a system that had been operating in the shadows for too long. And now, the world was paying attention. Shaq's final move, buying his dream jet. Even after winning the case, Shaq still hadn't bought a jet. He didn't want to give that company his money. So instead, he found a different dealership, one that respected him from the moment he walked in. This time, there was no hesitation, no sideways glances, no assumptions. They greeted him with professionalism. They treated him like the legend he was. After inspecting several models, Shaq finally chose his jet, a sleek black and silver beauty with custom interiors. When the deal was finalized, he posted a photo on Instagram. Shaq, standing proudly beside his jet, holding the keys in one hand. The caption? "When they tell you that you don't belong, prove them wrong." Respect Shaq. The post went viral. It wasn't just about buying a jet. It was about dignity, resilience, justice. Sitting inside his jet for the first time, Shaq leaned back in his seat and gazed out the window. He had fought. He had won. But most importantly, he had inspired millions. The fight wasn't over. There were still barriers to break, minds to change, and justice to be served. But for now, Shaq looked out at the blue sky ahead, and he smiled. Because this moment wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. And today, they had proved the world wrong. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know about your thoughts in the comment section. Also subscribe the channel for daily stories notification.